A number of people have sent me a couple of articles today, which I posted on my social sites. And I want to read this story to you. And I'll tell you why I'm reading it to you. This is why I write. This is why I'm behind a microphone. This is why I'm behind a television camera. John David Rice Cameron can trace his conservative roots to his middle school years. Now, who is he? You're about to find out. Back then, his father would often have talk radio on during rides home from school or tennis practice. He said, sometimes my dad, and this is from the, what is this from? thecollegefix.com. Sometimes my dad would listen to Rush Limbaugh, and he would kind of argue with him, recalls Rice Cameron, 20, a sophomore at Stanford University. I just found myself agreeing, basically, with everything Rush Limbaugh was saying. Now, I'll read on like others don't. Rice Cameron's parents are Democrats. His mother, Susan Rice, served in the Obama administration, first as U.S. ambassador, then as national security advisor. But despite his parents' political leanings, he said they believe extensively in debate and engaging the other side and exposing people to different viewpoints. Rice Cameron started listening to talk radio on his own. That's when he discovered Mark Levin, saying the firebrand pundit became his, quote, ultimate political hero, unquote. Quote, he'd talk about John Locke, and so I'd go and read some John Locke. He'd talk about John Smith, so I'd go and read John Smith. He'd talk about the Federalist Papers, so I'd read those, Rice Cameron said. I discovered the intellectual roots of liberty. That is exactly what we do here. Fast forward to today. Rice Cameron, recently described by one campus publication as Stanford's most outspoken political provocateur, is taking his passion for liberty and advancing it at Stanford University, his mother's alma mater, as president of the College Republicans. He told the College Fix, if we are going to promote the liberty movement, if the liberty movement's going to succeed, we need to do something about these college campuses. We need to ensure the liberty movement is heard. And it goes on. And he's very supportive, as am I, of Charlie Kirk's group, Turning Point USA, Candace Owens, who is just a terrific young lady, and so forth. Now, he goes on to say, Rice Cameron had a hand in all of it. 3 months ago, he became the group's president, that is, College Republicans. His activism has been inspired in part by the Tea Party movement, calling its platform true constitutional conservative. And you still have the Tea Party patriots out there with Jenny Beth Martin, who still do a wonderful job. And what does his mother, one of President Obama's chief lieutenants, think of her son's beliefs and actions? He said she and I disagree on a number of things, and we agree on a lot. She has always set an example of principle, entering public service for the right reasons, because you care, because you want to serve your country. Those are the kind of leaders I see in people like Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, the House Freedom Caucus, he added. I'll even say that about President Obama. He had some pretty destructive ideas. Most of his policies were wrong-headed. I think he's an honorable man who entered politics for the right reasons, despite having ideas and principles I have a hard time swallowing. Rice Cameron had been a Cruz supporter during the primary and even called the Mark Levin show to talk to his political hero about it. It was one of 2 times Rice Cameron spoke on air to, quote-unquote, the great one. Another time they spoke about an op-ed Rice Cameron wrote for the Stanford Review, headline, Students for Justice in Palestine linked to terrorist affiliate. Levin shared the column on social media, and it made Rice Cameron's day. The radio show host had no idea he was Rice's son. I had no idea up until I read this piece. And it goes on. And we have linked to it on the my various social sites. There's a much longer piece. In StanfordPolitics.org, as you can imagine. I printed it out. It was 16 pages long. But he really is intellectually curious, as am I, as are you out there. And it says in this piece, Rice Cameron identifies the Tea Party as his first exposure to a bold articulation of true conservative principles. He talks about the early impact the radio host Rush Limbaugh had on his political beliefs, and he points to Mark Levin, another arch-conservative radio host and author, quote-unquote, this is the writer, as the person who had the most profound influence on his worldview. And there's a little stack of the books that he uses for its, quote, intellectual firepower. He's got Glenn Beck's Liars. He's got Adios America by Coulter. He's got Mike Lee's Our Lost Constitution. And he's got Plunder and Deceit, my book, and Rediscovering Americanism. As a matter of fact, he recommended to his mother that she should read Rediscovering Americanism. He's a good young man. Anyway, I point these things out. And by the way, I'm happy to read the names of the other hosts, the names of the other authors and so forth. I have nothing to hide here. I'm confident in myself. I'm confident in these other people. People who do different shows or write different kinds of books. I do what I do because this is the way I do it. Now, I'll tell you why I'm bringing this up. It's what I said earlier. When I sit down and write a book, I have to make decisions about not just the subject, not just the chapters eventually and so forth. I have to make a decision about how I write the book. Some books are tougher than other books. Some books are meant for a wider audience than some of the other books. Liberty and Tyranny as an example, Plunder and Deceit as another example, were written for a very broad audience. Liberty and Tyranny, I felt it was time for a restatement of conservatism as well as a restatement of statism, a.k.a. progressivism. You had people like John McCain and Mitt Romney running around claiming to be conservatives. I knew that wasn't true. I'm talking about the 2008 election. And in Ameritopia, and especially Rediscovering Americanism, these are tough books. Those are my two toughest books, if you want to read them. And they get into great detail about the history of this country, into certain philosophers, the impact they had on our founders and framers, and in Rediscovering Americanism and the tyranny of progressivism, the history of progressivism, where they get their philosophy from and why it is so damaging to a constitutional republic that believes in individualism and private property rights and constitutionalism. And yet, if you go to Wikipedia, you won't recognize me. If you read what's there about me in Wikipedia, you will not recognize me. PBS did a TV show, 2 hours on conservatism, spent a lot of time on me, never spoke to me. You listen to what they play, you wouldn't recognize me. You'd have no idea what my views are other than, you know, from time to time when I pop off or something like that. That's all they have. If you go over to Media Matters and read what they say, and I don't recommend it because they are, in my view, a criminal front group with a hardcore left agenda and an anti-free speech agenda, you wouldn't recognize me. And yet what's interesting about all this, I'm on the air 4 hours most days. 3 hours on radio, 1 hour almost on Levin TV, give or take. And when you count Fox, obviously, that's another hour. Moreover, we have how many years of archives of my radio show on the Mark Levin Show website, Mr. Producer? You go back to 2011, 7 years. 7 years. Anybody who wants to hear what I've said on any radio show, anybody who wants to hear what I've said on any Levin TV show, every episode's up there if you're a subscriber. Or, of course, anybody who wants to hear what I've said on my new show on Fox, you can go online. It's all there. I don't need interpreters on the left who do not have as their purpose to engage in intellectual, substantive debate about philosophy, economics, history, constitutionalism, tyranny, and any of it. They don't want to debate it. Instead, they want to destroy you. Instead, they want to destroy you. This is why I condemn any notion that the modern media, the modern American media, are protecting freedom of the press. Of course they're not protecting freedom of the press. They're advancing an agenda. How are they protecting freedom of the press? They're not. Or you can see today what's going on with Roseanne Barr. Again, I'm not a special pleader here. I don't tweet stuff like these people tweet. That said, How do they justify Roseanne Barr out? Fine by me, I don't care. But Joanne Reed in, still, over at MSNBC. How do the Democrats justify their love affair with Louis Farrakhan? They refuse to condemn him. Absolutely refuse to condemn him. Or Keith Ellison, the number 2 at the DNC. He's the coach. He's the deputy chairman. The man has absolute solid links to Farrakhan and anti-Semitism. And there he is. The deputy chairman of the DNC. And they'll never touch him. How is that possible? Why is that okay? And you will not hear Republicans trash any of these people. Joy Reid, Louis Farrakhan, Keith X. Why not? Consistency is a good thing sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. But I want to salute this young man, John David Rice Cameron. Maybe we'll bring him on the show soon, Mr. Producer. I mean, the truth is he's respectful to his parents. Susan Rice is quite famous, public figure, controversial in the eyes of many, including me, worked very, very closely with Obama, still is often on TV and so forth, advancing a relatively left-wing agenda. And her son is none of those things. So that means he has to be especially strong-willed and thoughtful, and in many ways self-educated through readings and listening to programs and so forth like this. And I think it's important that he's respectful to his parents. What do you think about that? Even though he may disagree with them. I'll be right back.
Mark